Welcome to I Am Remarkable Week. I'm Karina Govindji, and I'm delighted to host this panel today. I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. My pronouns are she, her, and I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda for Google across the Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Canada region, which really involves trying to create a true sense of belonging for over 20,000 of our employees. And I'm delighted to have some guests who'll introduce themselves shortly. But just to kick us off, a reminder that I Am Remarkable is a global Google initiative that strives to empower everyone, but particularly women and underrepresented groups, to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond. And actually, to date, I Am Remarkable has reached and impacted over 250,000 participants across 150 countries and more than 800 companies. And this week really is to celebrate I Am Remarkable. So it's running from today through to the 15th of September. It's a real digital experience. It features talks, online workshops, confidence boosting challenges, and it's aimed to celebrate the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion and allyship, whilst empowering everyone to celebrate their achievements. So I do hope you'll be participating in some ways through this I Am Remarkable week. So I'll now take the opportunity to give a really warm welcome to our wonderful panelists, Tricia and Cecile. Thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps we could start with some intros. Tricia, can I start with you?
Good morning, and thanks for having us. So my name is Tricia Smith, and I'm based in Cork, Ireland, where it's a little bit grey today, but it's been a good summer. So I have the privilege of leading the Diversity and Inclusion Programme for Dell Technologies for Europe, Middle East and Africa. We have about 25,000 employees, and really, like yourselves and across the industry, we strive for that real inclusive culture. So as I say, I feel it a real privilege to lead that agenda for Dell Tech, and I'm delighted to be here today.
We're delighted to have you. Thank you so much. And Cecile, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Glad to meet here, to be with you today. A pleasure. Really, I love how you introduced Karina, saying it's a celebration. So I love celebrations. So on my side, I also lead inclusion and diversity for Europe at Accenture. I have the privilege to have had the role for a long time, calling myself a dinosaur, only for this topic, because I have been there since, in the last 10 years, having had a career in consulting before. And I love to say that I'm still in the business doing inclusion and diversity today, because more than ever, that's a business topic. At Accenture, we have committed to a 50-50 representation of women and men for those who identify as binary. So very proud of this objective, and really, really proud. I know we discussed about being proud today of the journey to date, having led a lot of the diversity segments globally. My pronoun is she, her. I'm a mother of 3, and I would call myself as a learner. And I really like this quote saying that the best travel is the one you are doing, being in the eyes, seeing the world in the eyes of other people. So I would just describe my latest years at Accenture, having tried to put myself in the shoes of the broader diversity we have, and I have learned so much. Again, very excited to be here in the very sunny Paris today, so we can discuss about whether if we have time at the end of the call. But thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Cecile. And I'm sure nobody would agree to using the phrase dinosaur to describe you. Lovely to have you both with us. And I'm hoping that today we can really have this as a conversation where we explore together 3 main themes. So I'd love us to start with thinking about really the situation we're in and the return to office that so many of us as companies are facing and what that means for inclusion. And then perhaps we can look at the role of leadership and the critical role that leadership plays in driving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ways that you and your companies have found to make that work. And then lastly, but really most importantly, the role that our communities play in really ensuring that we create cultures where everyone can belong. So let's play around with those 3 themes, if that's okay. And I'll kick us off with this return to office theme, because it is very front of mind for us at Google. Love to hear also your experiences. And we're really thinking about how we use this opportunity as a reset, as an opportunity to really rethink inclusion as we return to offices. And of course, that's happening, for many companies in different ways, depending on the countries that you're in and the landscape and the safety measures in place. But the reality is we know that the workplace is not going to look the same. And this whole concept of the hybrid workplace is now one that is going to be one of the future. And so at Google, we're really sort of thinking about how do we make sure as we return, or, for those that return, inclusion is front and center. And we know that actually the experience of, working from home has differed by different groups, that different underrepresented groups particularly have experienced that differently. Some are very keen to get back into the workplace. Others have really seen a lot of barriers reduced, whether that's, people with disability and, not having to face the physical barriers of going into work every day, but also the reduction for other underrepresented groups in micro inequities, those things that tend to happen more when you're in workplaces that actually they haven't had to experience. So I think we have to be really conscious that returning means very different things for different people and for, different communities. But I think there's a real opportunity to have a reset, to really think about what behaviours we want to be part of this future of our workplace from an inclusion perspective, and what behaviours we really don't want to be part of our future. So I just wanted to kind of share some of those reflections and things that we are thinking through as we look at this new hybrid workplace. And I'd love to hear some reflections. I don't know, maybe Cecile, I can start with you to think about, look, this, last 18 months, and really what you're thinking about in terms of future DEI practices from an inclusion perspective.
Yeah, so you have made really good points here. And as you have introduced myself saying I'm a learner, I think just the 18 months have been probably the best experience in my life just to learn. And also acknowledge that sometimes in inclusion and diversity, we were not too wrong to identify some of the topics we have been becoming a reality for all of us. For example, the meaning of connection, the meaning of belonging, which was a very abstract notion for some of us, has become like really at the heart of all our discussions. And I really like this word connection, if we really give it the right meaning. And most of you, if you don't, please get to know Brené Brown, who has written this really fascinating explanation about what it is, saying that connection is why we are here. It is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And that's exactly what it is. And that's exactly the answer that we have to answer today in the workplace, saying, okay, how can we provide an opportunity for connection and belonging to all of us? Let's not forget, like you rightly said, Karina, that in the past, this experience of lack of belonging existed. Persons with disabilities have raised forever the fact that they felt that they didn't belong. So they have been the first one to ask for inclusive design in the way we were just building the workplace. And suddenly it becomes a topic for all of us. So I think that's really, as you said, a moment of reflection, that if there is a moment in the story of our respective companies where we can make this change happen, that's now. And I don't think the debate is about, okay, are you going to work from home? Are you going to work from the office? Are you going to combine the both? Yes, we have to do all, because we have suddenly discovered that we were very diverse, which we knew before. We are diverse, and now everyone is acknowledging that. So the answer is, how can we make it work wherever we work? And it's not going to be the same for all the women, for all the persons with disabilities, and just make it flexible. The people have said to us, I'm sure everyone has heard that they need flexibility. But the answer is probably that the model itself has to be flexible. And we also have to be very humble that the answer is not going to be there in the next few months. And our ability to iterate, constantly listen to our employees will make it a success. But for me, a fundamental point is just what has happened in the past, the need for safety. The fact that some people have said that I don't want to go back in the office because I don't feel safe is something that should really call our attention. What was wrong? What do we have to fix today to ensure that everyone feels safe at home, in the workplace, wherever they are in their life? Because we are much more than a woman, as I said, an LGBT person, a person with disability. We are in different moments in our lives. and that needs to be acknowledged. So yeah, inclusive design is probably the answer. The fact that we will have to define respectively about what is the culture that we want to build around our people. And it sounds like a very, cheesy thing, like to say, oh, we have to be designed around the people. Everyone has heard this sentence in the last months, but really thinking that it's actually much more than a sentence. It's much more than just a quote. It's something that we have to think through in anything we do in the organization, in the processes we build, but more than ever in the behaviors that we are having at the top leadership. And I know it will be a topic we are going to discuss today, Karina, but in the people we are working closely with. So for me, just the fact that there is not a simple answer is actually good news, because it will force ourselves to really think about the most granular level of what is our culture, which is our people. And probably that's my positivity. I think it's just giving an opportunity to solve some of the challenges we have tried to solve as inclusion and diversity leads in the past year. So I am really positive. Of course, we will have some challenges. We know that in performance discussions, some people may have some bias against the people who have decided to stay at home. We'll have Black minorities feeling that, okay, it's better to be at home because you don't have anyone touching your hair. So we'll have that. But the fact that the discussion exists, for me, is a sign of positivity. So again, I'm glad I don't have the right answer today, because that would be probably the wrong answer to have it. So Trisha, just any reflections on this no answer for now from me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love, there are certain things you said there about our approach to design that I think are relevant, whether you like it or not. And I know lots of companies, as you said, are moving to remote or flexible or hybrid working models. The word hybrid, I think, has come into our vocabulary in the last 18 months, a little bit like the new normal, as it was. So look, we're lucky at Dell, or what do they say? The more I plan, the luckier I am. But at Dell, we've been championing this flexible work environment for about 11, 12 years now. So it's a key part of our company culture. And before COVID, there were about 65% of our team members working remotely or flexibly or in this hybrid model. So we have about 150,000 team members worldwide. So that's a big chunk of the population. And look, I can share from our experience with our Connected Workplace program what we learned. So we saw the working practices as a strategic business initiative. And this ties into what you're saying, Cecile. But we need to look at allowing our employees to choose the work style that best suits them, whether it's your job, your life, it's collaborative, flexible, whatever your diversity dimension, whatever your needs, and how we can enable you to be the best that you can be. And I think this ties in as well with I Am Remarkable for me, because I know when I joined Dell in 2014, the flexibility was one of the key attractors. And I kept thinking, okay, is this going to come true? And it really did, in a way that was what I would call authentic. And it was funny because when we started implementing the I Am Remarkable program, which everybody on the call is aware of, that was one of the things that really struck me, was being set up to be remarkable and being set up for success. And I think that's what we should be thinking about for all of our team members as we're looking at getting back to the office. Again, just from our experience, there are challenges. Flexibility previously was a selling point. Now flexibility is different, and we have to think about making sure that people switch off. I'm sure we've all had that inclination at the end of the day to just keep going as you move from the sitting room to the kitchen or whatever your setting is. And also, there's still resistance, as you mentioned, Karina, at the start. We saw at the start that some managers especially resisted or were unsure. But once we saw that it was more than a policy, the program is about a change in how we think about work, which has been pushed onto us. But really, work isn't anchored to a place. It's focused on outcomes. And hopefully we've all seen that over the past year or 18 months. So we have these Progress Made Real goals, which we in 2017 were launched by Michael Dell, and where we have gender goals, 50-50. We want 40% of our people leaders will identify as female by 2030. But one important goal that we had put in place was that 50% of our people would be working flexibly. And as I mentioned, in putting that design in place, we actually got to 65% before COVID even hit. So I don't think, Cecile, that it's something that we should be ashamed of thinking of, because we want the best for everybody. As I said, let's set ourselves up for success, set our team members up for success, to have that feeling like you're really included, you're belonging, and you're doing a good job.
Oh, thank you both so much. I mean, it's I think amazing the amount we can learn from other companies in this space. So, taking the example of Dell, of really having this embedded so long before the pandemic, and as many companies, large and small, are evolving to this way. I think the learning from other companies is really critical here. And both of you mentioned the role of leadership in this. So if we sort of transition to really thinking about actually the role that leaders play in creating diversity, equity, inclusion, and true belonging in environments. And certainly I can share a perspective from Google, which is we really do see the leader's role as critical in enabling this to happen. And there's a few ways that we try and embed that. And I'd love to hear more about how you do that in your organizations. I mean, one of the ways is, of course, we have goals, aspirational goals, and our leaders, are held accountable for those goals. And actually, we built in accountability for diversity, equity, and inclusion into the performance evaluation for our most senior leaders. And really thinking about then the role that leaders play in allyship has been really important. So the role of executive sponsors and how leaders step forward to educate themselves and to be truly, allies and sponsors for underrepresented groups. And we've also then we know that shift from leaders to managers is critical. So how do you make sure that actually, as part of everyday curriculum, diversity, equity, and inclusion principles are embedded in training, to be a good manager? And certainly in EMEA, so the region that I lead, we have a program actually that is designed to embed accountability within a manager's role. So it's called It's Up to Me. And it really is about making sure that actually every single manager has what we call an OKR, so an objective and key result, that is very specifically drawn from a bank of OKRs. So it's not a random, objective that they can pull out and say, oh, I'm going to attend this one event and that will be my, my diversity sort of metric met. But it really is designed to make sure that these are outcome driven, and every manager needs to have one. So those are some ways in which we are trying to really embed the responsibility. And we know that allyship is for everyone to take on board, but actually managers and leaders play a really pivotal role in this area. I'd love to hear just how you're thinking about the role of accountability of leaders and managers. And maybe I can start with you, Tricia, from a Dell perspective.
Yeah, just to go back to what you said about learning from each other, I'm fascinated to hear that the approach that you're taking, and definitely want to hear more about that program as well. Because as you said, as an industry, we have to address this topic. So I think that it is important to learn from each other. For me as a leader, what you said about leaders standing up and talking about the topic is really important. Now, I don't want to sound like an ad for Dell, but I do think I'm fortunate to work at a company where the person whose name is on the building stands and talks about diversity, about inclusion, belonging. That makes it much easier than as it's the tone at the top, and it cascades down through the organization. So it makes it a lot easier for me when it's driven there, and it makes it easier to inspire others. But personally, as a leader, I talk to people leaders about the fact that we're leaving too much potential talent on the table. We're in the middle of a talent shortage. I'm sure across the industry, we're all aware of this now. So if we are only looking at that small portion of talent that we traditionally have looked at, we're leaving so much else behind. Do people really need to have third level qualifications for particular jobs? Are excellent communication skills a necessity for jobs? If you think of neurodiverse candidates, you've just excluded them by putting that in there. They're not even going to apply for a job. So just some things like that we certainly can do. And that's what I do as a leader, is try to bring an awareness with people managers as they're hiring, as they're trying to retain talent as well. Be aware, for example, in the virtual environment, I'm sure we've all been in that situation where there are people who are non-native English speakers who can't kind of jump into the conversation with the same ease that maybe we can. How about maybe think about, if you think somebody isn't contributing, make the space for them to contribute. And there's some simple things like that I'll encourage everybody to just think about and have an awareness of. I also talk to people, to leaders, and try and inspire them about how closing that diversity gap is critical to us being innovative, incorporating new perspectives, being reflective of our customer base. We do not do business just with one homogenous group. We want to reflect and mirror our customers' values as well. So I think there's a lot that we can do in telling the story and making people understand as well why it's important. I think that a lot of people on this call will get it if you're involved in the I Am Remarkable program, that it makes such a difference when you see somebody being proud. I know that personally it made a huge difference to me. And if we can embed that in our culture, and that's really what we strive to do. And as a diversity and inclusion leader, what I strive to do with people managers, so that we can build and attract the future workforce, develop and retain people, empower the workforce, and then scale what we learn for impact, like you're speaking about, Karina, about sharing the knowledge as well.
Thank you, Tricia, so much there that maybe we can explore a little bit more, but I'll hand over to Cecile to build there. Just tell us a bit more about leaders and managers particularly, and how you're driving that.
Yeah, and Tricia, I was listening to you when you were calling out the fact that even culturally, when you are not a native English speaker, how difficult it could be just relating to that myself. So sometimes when the people don't see necessarily in myself diversity, like, I would say the standard diversity, and this example resonates so much with me, even though it's a little bit better today, but I recognize myself definitely when I have started to work in English. I really loved also what you have said about thinking differently, which echoes what we have been saying before, just picking the brain of our leaders also to find a solution. So sometimes you have leaders saying, okay, tell me what I have to do, and say, you know what, you are big enough with all that you are doing in the business to know what is the solution to this problem, which is now a business problem. You need to find the talents, you have to find. So empowering the leaders also to be part of the solution, for me, is absolutely critical. And the examples you have given specifically about the pool for me are relevant more than ever. In terms of the definition of leaders also, let's maybe take a pause of what that means. So sometimes we think about leaders in a very traditional way, the big leaders, sometimes male, white leaders, at the top of the organization. So I think it's really important that we are calling out the leaders at any level, because what we have heard from our people is they need to hear from the people who are the closest to them, the one they are working with every day, and where they have some conversation. So this is the level sometimes that we call the frozen middle, that we have to embark. Sometimes they are not in there, and for some good reasons, because they also have a lot of pressure. How do we embark them? And are we going to embark them, telling them this is what you have to do, as I said, or here is the magical recipe to inclusion, here is how you should include the others? Or should we just have them think about what it means for them? Because they are also experiencing exclusion for some aspects. Their life in the day-to-day is not necessarily easy, and starting to apply self-confession to themselves first can help also them to do a better job to create the culture of belonging and inclusion than we want to have in the organization. At Accenture, we have launched a program on mental health in March last year. So I think we were very visionary to have a program to launch in March when COVID started, to help the people to work on to get a better mental health. But we have continued with the program, with a new program which we call Thriving Together, which intent is really to spread this culture of belonging, asking the people to think about what belonging to yourself means before creating a culture of belonging for others. So asking them to pause on themselves, looking at the key criteria or key ingredients to inclusive culture, starting by self-compassion, growth mindset, being safe, seen, connected, but also courageous. And just taking a pause to have them reflect on what that means for them helps them to think about what that means for others. And you cannot belong to the others if you don't belong to yourself. And trust me, for having had multiple conversations with our leaders, most of the time that has been a rare moment in their career where they could take a pause and think about themselves. It's more of that we have to do. I feel, yes, we need KPIs. We are the first one to have like a lot of KPIs just to make representation tangible, because without any numbers, we don't get anywhere. But I think in parallel, we really should not forget this change in the culture and working with our leaders and not next to them to make change happen. So for now, it's just the beginning of the journey. It has started to have some role models, of course, telling what that means to belong to themselves and sharing some stories where we discovered that some people who looked very non-diverse were actually very diverse from plenty of hidden factors, and really trying to check a little bit this notion of diversity. And in terms of behavior, that also means that we need to build new skills. So if where we started the conversation, hybrid working, it cannot happen if we are not saying that you leaders, we expect you to work differently. And there was I read an article where someone was referring to the leaders today as agents of meaning and purpose. I thought it was an interesting description about the role, because that's really where we want them to work towards. Is it going to be easy? No, and it would be probably lying to them to say, this is going to be easy, you will understand everyone from day one. No, it is a journey. But if they get to increase their emotional skills, if they grow their coaching mindset, if they accept that being seen as an inclusive leader actually makes a big difference, I think we're already a little bit winning the battle. And I have an interesting example, just maybe to close on that one, about being seen, because we know for the people it's important to be seen when you're a diverse population, and sometimes for the leaders we also want them to be seen. Karina, you talk about the Ally program. I remember this story about having very inclusive leaders where I have asked them to sign up as being an LGBT ally. Okay, just you have a lanyard around the necklace, which I should have had today. Sorry, just a home working thing where I have forgotten to have my lanyard. And this person was absolutely inclusive, but he said to me, so I'm not going to wear a lanyard because, of course, I have no problem with the topic. Of course, I am inclusive. But I have said to him, how do people know when you have spent your entire life outside of Accenture, having people who do not make you feel safe? So it is actually important to show that you are supportive of the cause, because what you have in your mind, we don't know. And I think it's just about a little bit shifting the mindset of the people, where it's not so much about what you say, but it's how you make the people feel. You know, this very common quote, just really try to put yourself, it's just, no, do I feel I need to wear the lanyard? Is it going to benefit someone around me? And so a lot of reflections, but with this new program, and again, we will build with the leaders, also with our people, about building this belonging culture, starting by yourself. We are hopeful that we can transform our organization and play and balance KPIs and culture change.
Thank you so much, Cecile. I mean, there's so much there that you both said, but this idea of meaning and purpose is definitely, I mean, I that's definitely resonating for me. And I'd love us to explore just being pragmatic about leadership engagement in this area. And you've both touched on it, but the reality is we know, everything that leaders and managers have on their plate. And like you said, trying to get on the agenda can be challenging. And I'd love, some real practical stories or ways that you have really found ways to role model those leaders. And I can certainly from previous organizations say that, again, being pragmatic, quite honestly, sometimes there are leaders who will naturally find themselves in this space, knowing the right thing to say and do, and being very authentic without needing any support. And then there are other leaders who will struggle more in this space and often say, like you said, perhaps with the lanyard example, will say less because of their fear of making mistakes. So I think we need to put that out there. Often leaders will not step into this space because of fear that they may say or do the wrong thing. We know, of course, that not saying anything causes more harm, but we have to accept that that's the reality, that often they're feeling like they're walking on eggshells in the space around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's actually really important to think about ways that we can celebrate these leaders, make them look good, give them a platform in order that they feel more comfortable and supported in order to really be sponsors and to be advocates and to be true allies. And particularly those to whom it doesn't come as naturally. When I described, and I talked about two groups of leaders, of course, it's a whole spectrum of where they are in terms of their level of comfort. But I'm just interested in pragmatic ways that you found to really get leaders engaged. So I don't know who would like to pick that up.
I'll very quickly give you, I think what you said about fear is very real. We have an audience here today who's obviously interested in this topic. The reality is some people don't even know what the topic is or what D&I stands for, what EDI stands for. So as you say, we have to recognize that. And one thing that I've found is telling success stories is good. So it's like the confirmation bias that we all, it kind of steer ourselves towards. But if I can tell you, Karina, that your friend Cecile has actually gone through this and has had more success, if we take the hiring example, has been able to address the talent shortage by expanding the pool of candidates, by looking to different programs or maybe apprenticeships rather than graduate schemes, looking to the colleges where maybe more diverse populations go rather than the traditional universities, then it opens your eyes because you have a kind of a link, if you like, to what I'm speaking about. And that's a very simple thing, very tactical, but it's very effective when you're speaking to people who are kind of on a 1 to 10 spectrum or at 1 when it comes to this topic, definitely.
And I think actually that could also feed into the competitive element. So in the situation you just described there, I'm thinking, but actually I want to be Cecile. Like, why are you talking about Cecile and not using me as an example? And I think that kind of competitive element is actually very healthy in leadership to encourage some more of these behaviors.
Yeah, that works. At Accenture, we have a program, an equality award program that we are running globally. So we were very happy because it's integrating into a bigger program to recognition of the leaders, the champions, and the great initiatives. So first, it is not specific to equality, but it's also, there is a specific portion dedicated to equality. And then, we receive a lot of nominations and we take a lot of time to review with the top leadership of the organization. So our CEO, our market CEOs are involved in the review of all the profiles. And then we are really making sure that we are giving visibility to these stories, and they are really formally recognized, exactly like you said, Tricia, with the success stories, because that what works. IND may be a pain at the beginning. We know long term it always delivers some good results, and we have some fantastic stories to say. The best ones are the ones from the leaders who have started in areas where a few years back you were being told, okay, there is no pool. I'm taking some countries in Eastern Europe where there are basically no women working. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but just to the point that they are now the leaders of not only of their market, but the leaders at Accenture in terms of growing the number of females, because they have found some innovative solution. So we need to give them the visibility. We need, in terms of programmatically what they have been successfully delivered, we need to give more visibility to the role models, not in the IND webcast. We have to give them visibility in a webcast that is not specific to inclusion and diversity. So to be very practical, okay? So I'm spending my days, weekend, in trying to identify any opportunities to, in a subtle way, just tell these IND stories, the success stories, or how innovative we have been to have access a broader pool or build an inclusive culture. But I'm not happy if it's just in the IND call where I know I will have only the same people, the one who are interested in the topic. So I think we have to check the system to have IND totally ingrained into the fabric of the organization. So that's something that works. And to answer your question about the fear, the fact that some leaders may be a little bit uncomfortable first creating this culture of vulnerability, the fact that you don't know everything, and that's fine to be wrong, and we are working a lot on that one. And encouraging also people just to be sponsors or mentors for people who are different from them. So that could be very practical programs that we are implementing across the different countries to kind of enable this sometimes reverse mentoring. So most of the time where we learn when we learn from each other. But just we have to be open to have some real discussions. In Europe, we have had some really interesting discussion about racism. So both of you know how this topic in Europe it took a little bit more time to see how it was resonated. Some people were not comfortable with the term racism, about how they would speak to their teams, but just saying, okay, let's have a discussion. Let's tell us why you think it makes you uncomfortable to use the word about racism in the workplace. Enabling the people also to say what they have in their mind, and not creating this culture of, you can't say anything that is not politically correct. I think is also a practical thing. But yeah, recognition, and I'm sure it will be a good transition to the topic about networking, recognizing the leaders who make a difference is absolutely critical.
Yeah, thank you, Cecile. And you're right. I mean, we're coming on to explore our last topic, but it's by no means the least important. I'd probably say, this work happens because we have communities that really care, that come together to drive impact. And that's so powerful. And, Google, we're really proud of we call them, ERGs, our employee resource groups. But, these underrepresented groups coming together to create change. And we have actually, nearly a third of our employees actively engaged in these employee resource groups. And what we've seen over the years in terms of the growth of these groups and the impact that they have on the business. So, for us, products are critical, and making sure that actually, our users are representative is really our North Star, and everyone is a Google user. So really having our communities feed into our products and our systems and our processes is a key lever for us. And so I'd love us just to spend some time exploring just the powerful role that communities play. And we know that, again, I Am Remarkable really sits in the space of empowering our communities to celebrate themselves, particularly those from underrepresented groups. So Cecile, do you want to sort of share with us a little bit about how employee networks, the role of them at Accenture, and how you've seen them drive change?
Yeah, I could spend the whole day to speak about networks. I'm sure it's the same for you, Trisha, because I will not be there if it was not for the networks, for all that I have learned from them. So yes, we call them networks at Accenture. Also, in the US, we still use the word employee resource groups. And to come back on where we started about the connection, so it's absolutely an evidence that they are the ones that are connecting the people, sometimes in the areas where we didn't know we had a problem. So first, they are here, they are close to the people on the ground, and they are also the one to tell us where we are missing, where we have some hidden spots. So I would say that without the eyes of ground, we would not be there. We would not know that in some countries we need to work in spirituality. So in Italy, we have a group working on spirituality in the workplace. So I'm really always excited when I hear the new ideas and the groups that have formed beyond the standard view of inclusion and diversity. So the networks are everything. So when I started my role, I started to create the global LGBT network. I think we had like probably 5 networks at that time. Some people were telling me, Cecile, or beyond the US and UK, I'm not sure you will have a lot more. Now we have networks in Europe in each and every country. And for the ones who know the LGBT network, so the amount of ideas, the amount of energy is just like, wow. And what makes them successful from my perspective is the fact that, so first we give them a voice and they are totally ingrained into the local inclusion and diversity program. So they are not on the side, they contribute to tell us what the people need. They continue to inform our strategy, so that we would not have a strategy without the networks. And our role, our responsibility as IND leaders is to ensure that whatever they do is fully aligned with very clear objectives, just to ensure that they really see their contribution in the same way that we do as an inclusion and diversity leader. So to give you a very practical example of something we have been doing at Accenture for persons with disabilities, for LGBT networks. So we have created a framework for each of the networks, just to say, okay, there are 4 big things that we would like you to work on. Here are the KPIs. And for these 4 big things, you have different actions, and we are measuring them. To come back on what we have said about the competition, we are measuring them in a positive way to say, okay, who is doing what? And then we have a ranking, we have a power, a map of the world about who is leading, etc. And some are still behind because the country is it's less easy to implement things, and that's fine. But the fact that they feel that they're all together in the same journey and they are contributing to the business agenda of Accenture make them really proud. And they're also part of the recognition program I have just referred. So we recognize the networks every year, the ones who have made the greatest contribution. So this year, one of them has been the African Caribbean Network in the UK, with everything that has happened lately on the topic of ethnicity and anti-racism. We have been truly amazed by their ability to be on all sides, educating the people at a time where it was really hard to speak about the topic. So for them, they have really taken all the pain about talking to the people, but educating the broader community, talking to our CEO, educating the broader leadership, helping to identify the external partnership that made sense, organizing training for the people, helping to grow also the topic of ethnicity across Europe. So, I mean, we would not be there if it was not because of the collaboration with the network. So, as I said, I mean, I could speak all day about their work. I'm so happy to see that we have an African network in Germany, not necessarily a country where I would have expected to have one. Excited to see that the Latin America group has been created just because we had a discussion on ethnicity, and 1 week after, 80 people joined. I don't know what I don't know, but I know that the number of networks we will have will grow. And I also know that more and more they will be part of the strategy, and they will play a big role in educating, to come back and making connection with the previous topic, our leaders. So impressive work in terms of recognition. For what I have seen speaking to them, what they need is time, most of the time, more than financial recognition or these type of things, because they love what they do. And we all know that doing that on the top of your job may be a little bit challenging. So allowing them to have some time on that one, and also to tell us what is the best way to be recognized for programs, for access to leadership, excellent conference, like the hybrid working. So just listening to them and what they need will be critical. But I'm so hopeful and excited about the fact that their level of maturity will be very different, and they are learning from each other also is really promising. And the intersectionality topic, which is in all our mind, how they are going to not compete with each other, learn from each other, finding the glue between what is the common thing that they are trying to address all together will make them absolutely successful and probably translate into reality what we mean by being people-centric.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm so glad you raised the intersectionality. And actually, we've certainly found at Google, where we brought together women of color, for example, through various events. That has been hugely powerful. And actually, an analogy, we've also just launched this month our what we call Black Googler Network in Germany. And these are, like you said, these are very big, important, symbolic moves to build communities in, countries and places where these underrepresented groups haven't been properly recognized. But I know, Tricia, you'll have more to add in terms of our empowering employee resource groups.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I'm truly passionate about. So stop me if I'm still talking at the end of the session. No, it is. Look, I think everything that you've said is absolutely spot on. At the very start, you spoke about what is inclusion. And that sense of belonging to something can really be cultivated by having a community. I know for me, like we call them employee resource groups at Dell as well. So when I see an ERG or employee resource group event coming up, I sometimes have that feeling. It's a little bit like going for a run if it's raining. You look at it and you go, oh, do I have time? Is this important? Afterwards, you're always glad that you went. And for me, definitely, I would say that I have found my tribe as well. Cecile, you mentioned that. But around intersectionality, like I identify as a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a flexible worker, I'm an ally, I'm Gen X, and in that way, then I'm a member of our Women in Action ERG, Family Balance, Connexus for remote workers, our Black Networking Alliance, Pride, Gen Next. And I think one of the things that we can really do in the virtual world, we can cross-pollinate. So for example, with I Am Remarkable, why not make this available to everyone? It was our Women in Action team, and in EMEA, two particular folks, Emma Gregan and Maricela Escribano, shout out, who drive this program. And we've got over 4,000 people now in EMEA that have gone through this. We'll pass 4,000 this week. So through driving this, Women in Action run it, they enable it, but they make it available to all of the other ERGs. In that way, there is no reason why, just because it originally, and it was a pleasure, a privilege earlier, by the way, to meet Anna, one of the originators of the program. There's no reason that why, because it originated as a gender-focused program, that it shouldn't be made available to everyone. So we can do things like that. And, if I think of allyship, as you were speaking, Cecile, I was thinking about, I'm not going to be going on maternity leave anytime soon, but having been through it, I'm a mat leave mentor for Family Balance, our ERG. So for anyone who's been out of work for a while, you'll know that your confidence can take a dive. Things have changed, especially now. Maybe you went out and you're not sure, are you coming back to working at home, hybrid, flexible, what's the expectation? So through having somebody, a contact, a couple of weeks before you come in and then when you come back, it's an enabler to return and succeed and stay. When we think about allyship, to me, let's think about the broad idea of being an ally and advocating to create equal opportunities for everybody and make everybody feel included. Around the topic of racism, generating awareness. I run workshops with our Black Networking Alliance so that people can feel in a safe environment that they can ask the questions. You mentioned about fear, not being afraid to ask. And again, just to touch on the generational thing also, excuse me, obviously I'm Generation X and for anyone who can see me, but we did research a couple of years ago, I'm trying to think, it was 2018, and we researched and surveyed 12,000 Gen Zers, to get their views on work, on, what they find important. And actually, we identified that 65% of Gen Z would take a pay cut to work for a company with purpose. So if we think about that, when I left college, the goal was get a good, stable job, get a pension. So if a lot of managers are feeling like I would have been brought up to believe, and they don't understand that when they're trying to motivate their Gen Z employees, they're looking for something different. They want mentoring. They want the motivation of different experiences, of having space to be part of an ERG and do meaningful work. By bridging these gaps and coming back to the intersectionality topic, by really making us all more aware of what other people are experiencing, I think we can create that foundation of inclusion and belonging, certainly. As I say, I could talk about this all day. So, Karina, I will make space for you to jump in again if you need to.
Thank you. Well, I think collectively, we probably want to take this opportunity to say just a huge debt of gratitude to our communities collectively who, drive really the impact in creating this sense of belonging across our companies and, all the companies around. So just want to make sure we do that shout out. And clearly there's so much more opportunity in terms of how we reward, recognize and make these roles impactful and linked with talent strategy as well. So, that it is part of, career development, both for individuals and leaders to be engaged with these community groups. So I think there's much more to come, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that grows further as there's return to work and those communities come together in offices in different ways, as well as virtual settings. So we have a few minutes left, and this is I Am Remarkable Week. So I think we would be remiss not to just spend the last few minutes reflecting on ourselves. And the question that I am going to ask us all to answer is, tell us why you are remarkable. So I'm happy to kick off, and then I will hand over to you both. I know this moment often creates, let's be honest, some discomfort, and we'd much rather talk much broadly, but that's exactly why I Am Remarkable exists, to take that moment to celebrate our achievements. So I'm happy to share that I think I'm remarkable because I balance and juggle a lot. So obviously we all have demanding jobs. I also sit as a governor on a couple of boards. And I drive diversity and inclusion work for my religious community. So really doing the work that we've talked about, but for the religious community that has also a lot of different segments and challenges in how it comes to really create belonging within that community. I also have a family, so I have 2 kids, and this summer I added the responsibilities by adding a puppy to it. I will certainly not be the only one to have had that experience. So I would definitely say keeping all the balls up in the air and juggling a lot is why I am remarkable. So perhaps I can hand over to Trisha to share why you are remarkable.
Well, thank you for sharing, Karina. Thank you for making this uncomfortable situation. No, I think, as you say, like everybody, we try to avoid these things, but this is the goodness of this initiative. So I am remarkable because I get to make a difference to hundreds of people and a difference in the world every day. And I am remarkable because I enable people to achieve their best. And I am remarkable personally, like a lot of people I'm sure on this call, because I've kept all the balls in the air and continue to do so through what is an extremely stressful for the entire world situation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Trisha. Cecile, tell us why you are remarkable.
Yeah, I felt working in I&D and helping a lot on gender equality, I would not feel uncomfortable to do this exercise for myself, but the truth is I have felt uncomfortable and trying to find about, okay, where do I'm really remarkable? So that's a really interesting exercise to thinking, okay, which one am I going to pick for the discussion today? So I think it's a very interesting journey for that perspective. So reflecting on that, for me, I feel I am remarkable for standing for my beliefs, at the time, not necessarily where I am surrounded by people, you know, who are with me. Because as I started to say at the beginning of the call, I started at the time where I&D was really on the side and nice to have. And I really felt that was the right place to be. And I have, in a persistent way, you know, stay there until I see the end of the story. And hopefully I will not be there for all my life, because at some point we'll be there. But I'm really proud of having never given up. Even I was really new with some of the topics. I remember the initial discussion I had about being transgender, where I was truly ignorant, but I have taken the topics from scratch and saying, we are going to do something. I'm going to learn. I'm going to ask all the stupid questions, and I will make that work. So this persistence over time, which is not necessarily what you see sometimes, because we are trying, sometimes we try to go in different places, and I'm still there. I'm really proud of the impact that I have made. I know there is still a lot in front of us. So that would be my more than professional, because also very personal, my dedication to inclusion and diversity. That's where I feel I'm remarkable from a personal point of view, with echo probably what you have said about being very ambitious with everything, with life, with work, on all these things at the same time, and being totally imperfect, but now accepting to be imperfect. I'm proud of me that I accept to be imperfect, because I have chosen to play with these different balls, and including playing piano, which I'm really committed to now. So, but really, thank you for enabling us to think about that for ourselves, because as I&D professionals, you know, sometimes it's just, we help enable others, and we are not spending enough time for ourselves. And as I said, if you don't start by yourself, how are you going to help the other one? So thanks for this opportunity. Love the program. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecile. Thank you, Tricia, for sharing why you are remarkable. I hope all those listening are taking the moment to reflect and remind themselves that you are remarkable. And just a huge thank you for joining in our conversation today, as we've talked about how it is we embark on returning to offices and think about how inclusion can be front and center, how we ensure that our leaders are driving accountability for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and managers are creating that local sense of belonging in their teams, and how we continue to support our communities that come together to really drive outcomes and impact for underrepresented groups across all of our companies across the world. So hope you've enjoyed exploring those topics with us. I want to say Shana Tova to all our Jewish colleagues who are celebrating, and hope that you will take part in our I Am Remarkable Week events throughout the week. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Karina.